When I appeared in front of the guests at my birthday party with a black eye, everyone was shocked. The silence was absolute. Conversations died instantly. Glasses hung suspended in the air. I could feel every pair of eyes locked on my face, on the purple swelling around my left eye, on the bruise that no amount of makeup could hide. Then my son Mark stepped forward and said in a clear, proud voice, "It was my wife who put her in her place, so she would learn to respect us." Caroline. My daughter-in-law straightened her shoulders beside him, satisfied with that small, venomous smile playing on her lips. She looked at me as if I were trash, as if I were nothing. Then my brother Ernest approached Mark, and what he said changed everything. That day I lost my son, but I also found myself. Let me tell you how I got to that moment of public humiliation, how I went from being a beloved mother to the enemy in my own home, because this didn't start with a punch. It started much earlier with soft words and fake smiles with poison disguised as concern. 3 years ago, when my husband died, the world lost its color. Frank, my partner of 42 years, passed away silently one winter morning, a massive heart attack. I didn't even have time to say goodbye. One morning he was warm beside me under the sheets, and the next he was cold gone, absent forever. The pain was so intense I thought I would drown in it. I cried in the shower so Mark wouldn't hear me. I cried while I cooked. I cried looking at the empty side of the bed. But I had to be strong. Mark needed me. He had lost his father too. The house where we lived was our fortress, a beautiful property that Frank had bought when Mark was just a boy. 2 floors, a large garden, big windows that let in the morning sun. Frank had left it in my name in the will. "It's yours, Monica," he had told me months before he died, as if he had a premonition. "Don't let anyone take away what we built together." We signed the papers. Everything was in order. I was the legal owner of that house, of those memories, of every corner where I had raised my son. Mark lived with me. After his father's death, he decided to stay. "I'm not going to leave you alone, Mom," he'd say while we had coffee in the mornings. He worked at a construction company, left early, came back tired but always with a smile for me. We had dinner together. We watched movies on Sundays. We talked about Frank, about the memories, about how much we missed him. The pain was more bearable when shared. I cooked his favorite dishes. He fixed things that broke around the house. We were a team. We were family. I thought it would always be this way. Then Caroline arrived. He met her at a work conference. She was an event coordinator, elegant, self-assured, with that kind of polished beauty that seems to come out of a magazine. Dark hair, always perfectly styled. Impeccable nails, expensive clothes. The first time he brought her home, she smiled at me with pearly white teeth and gave me a hug that felt calculated, measured to the millimeter. "Mrs. Monica Mark talks so much about you," she said in a sweet voice. "It's a pleasure to meet the woman who raised such a wonderful man." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was genuine. I prepared a special dinner that night, roast chicken with the spices Mark loved, fresh salad, homemade bread still warm. Caroline ate little, pushing the food around on her plate while making comments about carbs and calories. "I hardly eat any starches," she said, looking at the bread with something close to contempt. "You have to take care of yourself, right?" She smiled at me, but there was something sharp in that smile, something that made me uncomfortable. Over the next few months, Caroline became a part of our lives. She came to dinner 2 or 3 times a week, always polite, always smiling. But I started to notice little things, the way she looked at the house as if evaluating it, the comments that seemed innocent but had hidden barbs. "This living room is so classic," she'd say, touching the furniture Frank and I had chosen together. "I bet they're 30 years old, right? There are such modern styles now." Or when she saw the family photos on the wall. "How nice that you keep so many memories of the past, Monica. Though sometimes clinging so tightly to yesterday doesn't leave room for tomorrow." Mark noticed nothing. He was in love, blind. When I tried to mention something, he would defend her, but with a condescending smile. "Mom Caroline just wants to help. She's used to organizing spaces. It's her job." And I would keep quiet. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, that bitter woman who doesn't accept her son's partner. So I swallowed my doubts and smiled. They got married 6 months later, a small but elegant wedding. Caroline organized everything. I barely participated. "Don't worry, Mrs. Monica," she would tell me. "I'll take care of it. You just relax and enjoy." On the wedding day, as I watched them exchange vows, I felt a knot in my stomach. I missed Frank. He would have known what to say. He would have seen what I was beginning to see. After the honeymoon, Caroline moved into the house. "It's temporary, Mom," Mark explained. "Just until we find our own place." I agreed. He was my son. I wasn't going to deny him a roof over his head. But temporary became 1 month, then 2, then 6. And with each passing day, Caroline took up more space. She reorganized the kitchen. She changed the dining room curtains. She moved the living room furniture. "We just need to feel at home, Monica," she would tell me with that soft smile. And I let her do it because I didn't want problems. But then the parties started. Caroline invited friends, colleagues, people I didn't know. She would fill the living room, they would laugh loudly, drink late into the night. And when I appeared, the atmosphere would change. The conversations would stop. They looked at me as if I were an intruder in my own house. "Mom, don't you want to rest?" Mark would say gently. "We'll take care of things here." And I would go up to my room feeling displaced, invisible, redundant. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you watched someone slowly take over your space and you can't do anything to stop it? Tell me in the comments if you've experienced something like this. Because I was living a silent nightmare, and I didn't even know it. The months passed, and the house was no longer mine. Not legally, not on paper, but in every detail that mattered. Caroline redecorated without asking for permission. One day I came home, and the cream-colored curtains that Frank had chosen were gone. In their place hung gray minimalist fabrics that made the living room feel cold, impersonal. "The other ones were just so outdated, Monica," Caroline explained as she folded the old curtains into a box. "These are more elegant, more current. You'll see, you'll get used to them." But I didn't want to get used to them. I wanted my curtains. I wanted my house. I wanted someone to ask me before changing the things Frank and I had built together. Mark worked more and more hours. He left before dawn and came back after 9 at night. We ate dinner separately. Me in the kitchen, them in the dining room with the door closed. I could hear their laughter, their private conversations, but I was no longer a part of it. I was no longer a part of my son's life. When I tried to talk to him, he was always tired, distracted looking at his phone. "We'll talk later. Mom," he'd say without looking up. "I have to check some emails right now." And I was left with the words stuck in my throat. Caroline started making more direct comments. She no longer bothered to disguise her barbs with sweetness. One afternoon while I was cooking, she came into the kitchen and wrinkled her nose. "Monica, do you always cook with so much grease? The smell just seeps into the whole house." She left a scented candle on the counter. "Use this afterwards, please. My friends are coming over tomorrow, and I don't want it to smell like old food." Old food. That's what she called the stew I was making, the same recipe Mark had loved his entire life. I started to cook less, to shut myself in my room more. The house felt hostile. Every space had Caroline's mark on it. Her magazines on the coffee table, her shoes by the entrance, her expensive perfume floating in the air. I was becoming invisible, a ghost in my own home. And the worst part was that Mark didn't see it, or didn't want to see it. One night I went downstairs for some water. It was past 11. I thought everyone was asleep. But I heard voices in the study. The door was slightly ajar. I approached without making a sound. Caroline was talking to Mark, her voice low, but intense. "We can't go on like this, honey. This house is too big for 3 people. And your mother, she's getting older. Wouldn't it be better if she lived in a smaller place, more manageable for her? There are very nice retirement homes with people her age. She'd have company. She'd be happy." My heart stopped. Mark was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he sighed. "I don't know, Caroline. She's my mother. I can't just kick her out." Caroline let out a soft laugh. "It's not about kicking her out, my love. It's about all of us having our own space. Think about it. We could have this house for ourselves, start our family. Don't you want that?" I moved away before I heard Mark's answer. I went up the stairs on trembling legs. I locked myself in my room and cried silently, my face buried in the pillow so they wouldn't hear me. They wanted to get rid of me. They wanted my house, the house Frank had left me, the house where I had raised my son. And Mark was considering it. My own son was thinking about getting rid of me as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the new decor. The following days were tense. I couldn't look at Caroline without feeling sick. She knew it. I could see it in her eyes and the way she smiled at me with that calm superiority. She knew I had heard. And she didn't care. In fact, she seemed to enjoy it. She started to become more territorial. "Monica, could you knock before entering the living room? Sometimes we're having private conversations." "Oh, Monica, it's better if you don't use the washing machine after 7. The noise bothers us when we're watching TV." The house had rules now. Rules I hadn't made. Rules that made me an unwelcome guest. I tried to talk to Mark. One morning I caught him before he left for work. "Son, I need to talk to you." He was checking his briefcase, rushed as always. "What's wrong, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "I feel like Caroline and we're not doing well. I feel like I'm not welcome here anymore." Mark frowned. "Mom, don't say that. This is your house." But he said it automatically without conviction, like someone repeating a learned phrase. "Then why do I feel like I have to ask permission for everything? Why do I feel like I'm in the way?" Mark ran a hand through his hair, uncomfortable. "It's just that Caroline is used to having her space. It's nothing personal. Just try to be more flexible, okay? For me. Please." And he left. He left me standing there with the words of defense that never came. That night, Caroline hosted another dinner party. 6 people arrived. They took over the dining room loud and cheerful. I was in the kitchen making myself a cup of tea when one of Caroline's friends walked in. She looked at me surprised. "Oh, hello. I didn't know someone else was here." Before I could answer, Caroline appeared behind her. "Ah, that's Monica Mark's mother. She lives here." The way she said it. "She lives here." As if I were a freeloader, as if it wasn't my house. The friend nodded politely, and they left. I heard their laughter from the dining room. I stood there in my own kitchen, feeling small, humiliated, invisible. The weeks went by. Caroline started talking about renovations. "This kitchen is so old," she'd tell Mark while I was standing right there as if I couldn't hear her. "We should modernize it, change the cabinets, put an island in the center. Have you seen how much a property's value increases with a renovated kitchen? We could invest about $20,000 and get double that back if we ever sell." "Sell." She said, "We sell." As if the house were hers. As if I didn't exist. Then came my birthday. 70 years old. Mark suggested having a party. "You deserve to celebrate, Mom," he told me with a smile that reminded me of the boy he once was. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe things could get better. Maybe I still mattered. Caroline took care of everything. She invited family, friends, neighbors. She decorated the living room with silver balloons and garlands. She prepared a table with elegant appetizers. On the outside, everything looked perfect. But I felt a strange tension in the air. Something wasn't right. The morning of my birthday, I went downstairs for breakfast. Caroline was in the kitchen talking on the phone. When she saw me, she ended the call abruptly. "Good morning, Monica." Her tone was cold. I poured myself coffee in silence. She just stood there watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Do you know what day it is?" I asked, trying to break the ice. "Yes, your birthday." Silence. "And also, the day you should be making some important decisions about your future." My hand stopped with the cup halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" Caroline crossed her arms. "Mark and I have been talking. We need this house, Monica. We want to start a family. We need space, privacy, and you. You need a place more suitable for your age." I felt the floor move beneath my feet. "This is my house, Caroline." She smiled, that small, venomous smile. "For now." I didn't know what to say. I went to my room, my heart racing. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. What was happening? How had I gotten to this point? I looked at the photos on my nightstand. Frank and me on our wedding day. Mark as a baby. Our happy family. And now everything was falling apart. That afternoon I got ready for my own party, feeling a huge weight on my chest. I put on the ivory dress I had bought especially for the occasion. I carefully applied my makeup, trying to hide the dark circles, the marks of insomnia and distress. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a tired woman, a woman who was losing the battle in her own home. I took a deep breath. I had to go down. The guests would be arriving soon. I couldn't hide in my room on my birthday. I went down the stairs slowly. The living room was transformed. Caroline had done a flawless job. Everything looked elegant, sophisticated, perfect. But it didn't feel like my party. It felt like someone else's event. The first guests started to arrive. My brother Ernest was one of the first. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired." He looked at me with concern, but didn't press. More people arrived, cousins, old friends, neighbors. Everyone congratulated me, hugged me, wished me the best. For a moment, surrounded by people who loved me, I almost forgot the tension I was living in. Caroline moved among the guests like the perfect hostess, smiling, charming, attentive. Mark was by her side, proud of his wife. I watched them from a distance, feeling like I was watching someone else's life. My own party and I was a spectator. Caroline approached me at one point with 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She offered me one. "Happy birthday, Monica," she said, with that smile that no longer fooled me. I took the glass out of politeness. "Thank you for organizing all this." She tilted her head. "It's the least I could do. After all, soon this house will be completely ours, and we want to start off on the right foot." She said it in a low voice just for me, while the others chatted around us. It was a threat disguised as courtesy. I needed air. I excused myself and went up to the second floor. I went into the bathroom and closed the door. I leaned against the sink, breathing heavily. I had to calm down. I couldn't ruin my own party with a panic attack. I splashed cold water on my wrists. I took a deep breath 1, 2, 3 times. When I felt more stable, I left the bathroom. And then I saw her. Caroline was in the hallway in front of my bedroom door. She had my jewelry box in her hands. My jewelry box, the small wooden chest where I kept the few pieces of jewelry Frank had given me over the years. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. Caroline turned without a hint of guilt on her face. "Just looking. This jewelry is very old, isn't it? I bet it's worth something." I walked towards her and snatched the jewelry box from her hands. "You have no right to touch my things." She laughed, a soft, dismissive laugh. "Calm down, Monica. I wasn't going to steal them. Although with what they're worth, they could help pay for part of the kitchen renovation." I felt rage rising in my throat like lava. "Get out of my room!" Caroline took a step towards me. We were inches apart. "This isn't your room. This is our house, and the sooner you understand that, the better for everyone." Something inside me broke. All the accumulated humiliation, all the forced silence, all the invisibility I had endured for months suddenly exploded. "This house is mine. It's in my name. Frank left it to me, and you have no right." The words came out with more force than I expected. Caroline's eyes narrowed. Her face changed. The mask of politeness fell away, and I saw something ugly, something cruel underneath. "You're a ridiculous old woman clinging to the past. Mark doesn't need you anymore. I'm his family now, and we will get this house with or without your permission." I should have stayed quiet. I should have gone downstairs and forgotten about it, but I couldn't. "Get out of my room right now, or I'm calling Mark." Caroline let out a laugh. "Call Mark. Go ahead. He always believes me." Always. And she was right. We both knew it. But I couldn't back down now. "Out." I pointed to the door. Caroline looked at me with pure hatred. Then without warning, she pushed me. It wasn't a hard push, but I wasn't expecting it. I lost my balance. My hip hit the edge of the dresser. I tried to grab onto something, but my hand slipped. I fell sideways. My head hit the corner of the nightstand. The pain was instant, sharp, blinding. I brought my hand to my eye and felt wetness, blood. Caroline just stood there looking down at me on the floor. For a second, I saw something like fear in her eyes, but she composed herself quickly. "You tripped on your own," she said in a firm voice. "You're old and clumsy. You fell." She looked at me for a few more seconds and then left the room, closing the door behind her. I stayed there on the floor, touching my eye, which was beginning to swell. The physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation, the helplessness, the horror of what had just happened. I don't know how long I was there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. I finally got up. I looked in the mirror. The skin around my eye was already turning purple. There was a small cut on my eyebrow. The blood had left a thin line down my cheek. I cleaned it with a towel. I tried to cover it with makeup, but it was useless. The bruise was too obvious. Downstairs, I could hear music, laughter, conversations. My party was going on as if nothing had happened, and I was up here bleeding, beaten, broken. I thought about not going down, about staying locked up, about waiting for everyone to leave. But then I heard Mark's voice calling me. "Mom, come on, we're going to cut the cake." I couldn't hide. It was my birthday. I had to face what had happened. So I went down, slowly. Every step was an effort. When I reached the last step, the conversation stopped. One by one, the guests turned to me. I saw their faces change, surprise, horror, confusion. The silence fell like a tombstone. Mark was the first to speak, but not with concern, not with alarm. He stepped forward and said in a clear, almost proud voice, "It was my wife who put her in her place so she would learn to respect us." The words fell like bombs in the middle of the silence. Caroline straightened her shoulders beside him, satisfied. She looked at me with those cold eyes, victorious. The guests were motionless. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. And I just stood there in front of everyone, humiliated in the most horrible way I could imagine. My own son justifying violence against me. My own son choosing her over me. Then Ernest pushed his way through the crowd. His face was red with fury. He walked straight up to Mark and looked at him with an intensity I had never seen before. What kind of man lets his wife assault his mother and then celebrates it in front of everyone? He said, his voice low, but loaded with contempt. Mark turned pale. "Uncle, it's not what it looks like." Ernest cut him off. "Your father would be ashamed of you." The silence that followed was devastating. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Caroline tried to take his arm, but Ernest shot her a death glare. "And you came into this family with lies. We all see it." Some guests started to murmur. Others looked at the floor, uncomfortable. A cousin came up to me. "Monica, are you okay? Do we need to call someone?" I shook my head. Tears were starting to cloud my vision, but I wasn't going to cry. Not there. Not in front of them. Ernest took my arm gently. "Let's go upstairs. I'll clean that wound." But before I could move, Caroline spoke. Her voice was shrill, desperate. "She provoked me. She insulted me. I was just defending myself." Ernest turned to her. "Liar." The word hung in the air. Mark finally reacted. He stepped between Ernest and Caroline, protecting her as if she were the victim. "Uncle, that's enough. You don't know what happened." Ernest let out a bitter laugh. I look at your mother with a black eye, and you defending the person who hit her. I know exactly what happened here." More guests started to leave. Some said goodbye awkwardly, others just left without a word. The party was falling apart. My birthday had turned into a public nightmare. An elderly woman, a friend of my late husband, approached before she left. She took my hand and whispered, "Frank never would have allowed this. Take care of yourself, Monica." And she left, leaving me with those words stabbed in my heart. Ernest took me to the kitchen. He closed the door. He sat me in a chair and began to check my eye carefully. "This needs ice," he said as he opened the freezer. He wrapped ice cubes in a clean cloth and pressed it gently against my face. The cold made me flinch, but the pain began to subside a little. "How did it happen?" Ernest asked, his voice controlled, though I could see the contained fury in his eyes. I told him everything. The jewelry box, the argument, the push, the fall. As I spoke, I saw his jaw tighten more and more. "This can't go on," he said when I finished. "This house is yours, legally yours. She has no right." I wiped away the tears that had started to fall without permission. "But Mark, he's on her side. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He just defended her." Ernest clenched his fists. "Mark is blinded, but he's going to wake up, and when he does, he's going to regret this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that my son would go back to being the man I had raised, but something inside me had broken that night, something that might never be repaired. The kitchen door burst open. Mark came in with Caroline hot on his heels. "Mom, we need to talk," he said in a serious tone. Ernest stood up, getting in between us. "Don't you go near her." Mark looked at him with frustration. "She's my mother. I have a right to talk to her." Ernest didn't move. "You lost that right when you let your wife hit her, and you humiliated her in front of everyone." Caroline intervened, her voice sharp and defensive. "It was an accident. She tripped. I didn't touch her." I looked at her. There she was, lying through her teeth without a shred of remorse on her face. "You pushed me," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You pushed me and I fell, and then you left me on the floor like I was trash." Caroline shook her head, fake tears starting to form in her eyes. "Mark, she's lying. She's trying to tear us apart. She's jealous of what we have." It was incredible. She was turning the tables, playing the victim. And Mark looked at her with concern, as if he truly believed she was the one who needed protection. "Monica has always been difficult," Caroline continued, her voice breaking. "From the day she met me, she's treated me poorly. She's made me feel like I don't belong here. I just want peace. I want us to be a family." Every word was a stab. She was building a narrative where I was the villain and she was the innocent victim, and Mark was buying all of it. "Mom," he said, turning to me, maybe you need to rest. You're stressed, confused." Confused? He was calling me confused, as if I were crazy, as if I had made it all up. Ernest exploded. "Are you listening to yourself, Mark? Your mother has a black eye, and you're trying to convince her she's confused." Mark ran his hands through his hair, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to believe. I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened." Caroline clung to his arm, sobbing against his shoulder. "She hates me, Mark. She's never accepted me. Now she's making things up so you'll kick me out of the house." And it was a masterful performance. And it was working. I stood up from the chair. The ice pack fell to the floor. I looked my son directly in the eyes. "Mark, I am your mother. I raised you. I gave you everything I had. I loved you unconditionally. And now you're calling me a liar to protect a woman who hit me." My voice broke on the last word. Mark looked away. He couldn't meet my gaze. And in that moment, I knew I had lost him. Maybe not forever, but right then. Caroline had won. "I want you to leave," I said with all the dignity I could muster. "This is my house. I want you to pack your things and go." Caroline stopped crying instantly. Her face hardened. "This house is too big for you alone. You need help. You need supervision." The word supervision sounded like poison. Ernest took a step forward. "The only one who needs to leave is you. Monica is the legal owner of this property. You can leave voluntarily, or we can call the police and have you removed by force." Mark finally spoke, and his words shattered me. "We're not leaving. This house should be mine. My father built it for our family, for me. It's not fair that Mom has everything when I need to start my own family." There it was, the truth. He didn't care about my well-being. He didn't care that I had been hit. He cared about the house, the property, the money. Carolyn had put that idea in his head, and now he was repeating it as if it were his own. "Your father left this house to me because he trusted me to take care of it," I said, my voice shaking. "Because he knew it was my sanctuary, my security, and you want to take it from me." Mark didn't answer. Caroline did. "You need to be realistic, Monica. You're old. How many more years are you going to live here? 10, maybe 15 if you're lucky. We're young. We need this space now. We can take care of you somewhere else, a more appropriate place." Every word was calculated, cold, merciless. Ernest took out his phone. "I'm calling the police right now." Mark turned pale. "Uncle, don't do this. I'm your nephew." Ernest looked at him with deep disappointment. "And she is my sister. And you are destroying her for a woman who only wants your money." Caroline laughed. "My money? Mark doesn't have any money. Everything is in her name." She pointed at me with contempt. "That's why we're here. That's why we need her to understand she's not alone in this anymore." The kitchen door opened again. It was David, the family lawyer. He had been a close friend of my husband and had drafted his will. Apparently someone had called him during the chaos of the party. He walked in with his briefcase in hand, looking at the scene seriously. "Good evening. I heard there was some trouble here." His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Caroline tensed up. Mark looked confused. Ernest sighed in relief. "David, thank goodness you're here," Ernest said. "We need to clear up a few things about the ownership of this house." The lawyer nodded. He opened his briefcase and took out a folder. "I brought the documents. I thought we might need them." He looked at Mark and Caroline. "I believe there's some confusion about the legal status of this property." Caroline straightened her back, trying to regain her composure. "There's no confusion. We all know the house is in Monica's name, but Mark is her son, her only heir. It will be his eventually." David looked at her with a neutral expression, but his eyes were sharp. "That's not exactly correct." He opened the folder and took out several documents. "Your late husband's will has certain specific clauses." My heart started beating faster. "Clauses? Frank never mentioned anything like that." The lawyer continued. "The house was left to Monica in absolute ownership, but there is a protection clause." Mark frowned. "What does that mean?" David glanced at me briefly as if asking for permission. I nodded. I needed to know. Everyone needed to know. "It means that if Monica is pressured, coerced, or forced to leave the property by any family member, the house does not pass to direct heirs. Instead, it will be donated entirely to a charitable institution specified in the will." The silence that followed was absolute. Caroline turned pale. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The lawyer's words hung in the air like a sentence. Caroline was the first to react. "That's ridiculous. That can't be legal." David looked at her with professional calm. "It is completely legal. Your husband made his intentions very clear. He wanted to protect his wife from any kind of family pressure after his death." He took another document from the folder. "Here is the exact clause. If Monica is forced to sell, donate, or abandon the property under duress of any kind, the house automatically passes to the St. Gabriel's Senior Foundation. Mark would inherit absolutely nothing." Mark slumped into a chair. His face had lost all its color. Dad did that." It wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with shock. David nodded. "Your father was a wise man. He had seen many cases of families destroyed by inheritances. He wanted to make sure Monica had a safe place for the rest of her days, without pressure, without manipulation." He looked directly at Caroline when he said the last word. She clenched her fists, her mask of sweetness now completely shattered. Only naked rage remained on her face. "So all this time," Ernest said, looking at Caroline with contempt, "this whole plan to get my sister out of her house, all the humiliation, the disrespect, the push today, it was all for nothing, because you were never going to get this house." Caroline took a step back as if she'd been slapped. I didn't have a plan." But her voice sounded hollow. We all knew the truth now. Everything was clear. The renovations she wanted to do, the comments about the property's value, the conversations I had overheard about nursing homes. It had all been a calculated strategy to push me out of my own house. Mark slowly got up. He looked at me. He really looked at me for the first time in months. I saw confusion in his eyes. I saw shame starting to appear. "Mom, I didn't know." His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know about that clause. I looked at him, feeling a deep pain in my chest. But you knew they were making me feel bad. You knew I felt displaced in my own home, and you did nothing. You chose to believe her instead of me. Mark opened his mouth to reply, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say? It was true. It was all true. Caroline changed tactics. Her eyes filled with tears again. Mark, honey, you have to believe me. I didn't know anything about this. I just wanted us to have our own space. I wanted us to be happy. She clung to his arm desperately. Don't leave me. Please. We're in this together. But Mark pulled away from her grasp. Something had changed in his expression. The fog was beginning to lift. How long have you been planning this? He asked, his voice dangerously low. Caroline shook her head. I didn't plan anything. You're misinterpreting everything. David intervened again. There's something else you should know. He took out another document. 3 weeks ago, someone requested a professional appraisal of this property. The appraiser contacted my office because he noticed the name on the request didn't match the registered owners. He looked at Caroline. The request was made by Caroline Mendez. She paid $500 for a full appraisal of the house, including future value projections if certain renovations were made. The silence was deafening. Mark looked at his wife as if she were a stranger. Also, David continued, we received an inquiry 2 weeks ago asking about the legal process for declaring an elderly person incompetent to manage their own assets. My heart stopped. Incompetent? Had they tried to declare me incompetent? The inquiry came from the same phone number registered to Caroline Mendez. David closed the folder. We didn't proceed with any information, of course, but it was logged. Caroline backed up against the wall. That's a lie. You're all making this up to turn him against me. Mark turned to her, fury in his eyes. You tried to declare my mother incompetent. You tried to take her house using the law. Caroline was sobbing now, but they were tears of panic, not sadness. I was just researching options. I wasn't going to do anything. I just wanted to know what was possible. Mark ran his hands over his face. My God, what have I done? What did you turn me into? He looked at her with horror as if he could finally see what we had all seen from the beginning. Ernest put a hand on my shoulder. Monica, do you want them to leave tonight? I looked at Mark, my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become whom I no longer recognized. Part of me wanted to scream at him, wanted to throw him out of the house immediately, but another part, the part that had been a mother for so long, still felt love for him. A wounded, broken love, but love nonetheless. Mark can stay tonight, I said in a tired voice, but she leaves, now. Caroline's eyes widened in shock. You can't do this. I'm his wife. I looked her straight in the eye. This is my house, and I want you out of it. Mark didn't defend her this time. He stood in silence, staring at the floor. Caroline looked at him, waiting for him to say something to protect her, as he always had. But he didn't move. Reality had finally hit him. David spoke in a professional tone. Mrs. Mendez, I suggest you pack your personal belongings and leave. If you refuse, I can call the authorities. Caroline looked at all of us with pure hatred. There were no more tears, just rage. This isn't over, she said in a venomous voice. I have rights. I'm Mark's wife. This house will be mine eventually, too. Ernest took a step toward her. You didn't hear a word the lawyer said, did you? This house will never be yours, ever. And if you keep pushing, if you keep trying to get Monica out the house, goes to charity, and neither you nor Mark will see a dime. Caroline gritted her teeth. She looked at Mark one last time. Are you going to let them throw me out like this? Are you going to choose her over me? Mark looked up. His eyes were red. I think you already made your choice a long time ago. You chose this house over me, over us. His voice sounded broken. Caroline let out a bitter laugh. You're an idiot. A weak mama's boy who's never going to grow up. She grabbed her purse that she had left in the kitchen and stormed out, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the house. We stood in silence for a long moment. Mark was still standing motionless, as if he couldn't process what had just happened. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tears started to fall down his cheeks. "I don't know how I let things get this far. I don't know when I stopped seeing you." I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him everything was okay. But I couldn't, because it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. "She pushed me, Mark. Your wife pushed me and left me bleeding on the floor. And you defended her, in front of everyone, on my birthday." My voice broke. "Do you have any idea how that felt?" Mark covered his face with his hands. His shoulders were shaking. I know, and I have no excuse. She would say things. She made me feel like you were the problem, that you were the one who didn't accept her. And I believed her. God, I believed everything she said." David put the documents back in his briefcase. "Monica, if you need a restraining order against Caroline, I can help you with that." I shook my head. I just wanted it all to be over. I just wanted peace. "For now, I just want her gone, and for her not to come back." The lawyer nodded. "Understood. But if she contacts you, if she threatens you in any way, call me immediately." He gave me his card, even though I already had his number. "I'll stay available just in case." He said goodbye and left, leaving the three of us in the kitchen. Ernest broke the silence. "Mark, you need to decide what you're going to do. But whatever it is, your mother can't keep living with this tension." Mark nodded without looking up. "I know. I need to think. I need to process all of this." And he looked at his left hand where his wedding ring shone. He took it off slowly and placed it on the table. The sound of metal on wood sounded final, definitive. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in my room with the door locked for the first time in years. My eye was throbbing. The swelling had gotten worse and the bruise was spreading down to my cheek. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scene repeat, the push, the fall. Caroline's face looking down at me on the floor without remorse. And worse, I saw Mark defending her in front of everyone. Those words echoed in my head over and over. It was my wife who put her in her place. My own son, my baby boy. How had it come to this? I heard movement in the house throughout the night. Footsteps coming and going. Doors opening and closing. Muffled voices. I didn't know if Mark was still here or if he had left with Caroline. Part of me wanted to know. Another part was afraid of the answer. Ernest had stayed in the guest room. He had told me he wouldn't leave me alone tonight, that he would stay until he was sure I was okay. His presence gave me some comfort, but it couldn't erase the pain in my chest, a pain that had nothing to do with the physical blow. When dawn finally broke, I went down the stairs carefully. The house was silent. The remnants of the party were still everywhere. Deflated balloons on the floor, abandoned glasses on the tables, plates with half-eaten food. Everything looked sad in the gray morning light. I went to the living room window. Mark's car was still in the driveway. He was still here. I didn't know if that relieved me or made me more anxious. Ernest appeared at the kitchen door. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered me one. "You didn't sleep at all," he said. It wasn't a question. The dark circles must have been obvious. I couldn't. I took the cup gratefully. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly what I needed. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Ernest spoke. "David called me an hour ago. Caroline tried to contact him last night. She wants to negotiate." I looked up, surprised. "Negotiate what?" Ernest grimaced. "She wants money. She says if we pay her a certain amount, she'll sign the divorce papers without any trouble and leave quietly. If not, she's threatening to go to the media, says she'll tell everyone the family is kicking her out onto the street." I felt sick. Of course she wanted money. It had always been about money. "How much is she asking for?" Ernest hesitated. $50,000. The figure hit me like a punch. $50,000. It was a huge amount. Money I didn't have readily available in cash. I would have to sell investments, maybe take a loan against the house. "I'm not paying her a thing," I said firmly. "She assaulted me. She tried to manipulate my son to steal my house. She doesn't deserve a cent." Ernest nodded in approval. "That's what I told David. He agrees. He says her threats are empty. She has no legal case." We heard footsteps on the stairs. Mark appeared. He looked terrible. Puffy eyes, wrinkled clothes, disheveled hair. He had probably slept as little as I had. He looked at both of us cautiously. "Good morning," he said in a hoarse voice. Ernest didn't answer. I just nodded. Mark poured himself coffee with trembling hands. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "Caroline went to a hotel last night. She's been sending me messages all morning." He paused. "She wants to talk, to fix things." Ernest snorted. "Fix things after everything she did." Mark sank into a chair. "I know it sounds ridiculous, but she's my wife. We've been together for 2 years. I can't just end everything like this." I looked at him in disbelief. "Mark, she tried to have me declared incompetent. She researched how to take my house. She hit me and left me bleeding, and you want to fix things with her." My voice rose. "What else does she have to do for you to open your eyes?" Mark rubbed his face with his hands. "You're right. I know you are, but it's complicated. I love her. Or I loved her. I don't know anymore." His voice broke. "Everything is so confusing. I thought I knew her. I thought we were happy. And now I find out it was all a lie. That she only wanted the house. That I was just a means to get what she wanted." The tears started rolling down his cheeks again. I feel like such an idiot, so used. Part of me wanted to comfort him. He was my son after all. But the wound was too fresh, the pain too deep. "Mark, she didn't just use you. She destroyed me too. She turned my home into a place where I felt like a stranger. She made me feel like I was in the way. She humiliated me in front of everyone, and you let her do it. You were a part of it." Mark nodded miserably. "I know, and I'll never be able to forgive myself." He looked up at me. His eyes were red and swollen. "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" I didn't know how to answer. Could I forgive him? A mother's love doesn't just disappear like that. But the trust was shattered. The respect was damaged. "I don't know, Mark. I need time. I need space. I need to heal." My voice sounded tired. "And you need to decide what kind of man you want to be. Because the man who defended his wife after she hit his mother is not the son I raised." Ernest stood up. "I'm going to be blunt. Mark, you need to leave this house for a while. Your mother needs peace. She needs to feel safe in her own home, and right now your presence only brings her pain." Mark turned pale. "You want me to leave from my childhood home?" Ernest didn't flinch. "This isn't your house. It's your mother's house, and after what happened yesterday, she has every right to ask you to leave." Mark looked at me, hoping I would contradict him, hoping I would say he could stay. But I didn't. Ernest was right. I needed him to go. I needed to breathe without feeling the constant tension. I needed my space back. "I think it's for the best," I said finally. "For now, until things calm down." Mark closed his eyes as if he'd been struck. "Okay," he whispered. "I understand." He got up slowly. "I'm going to pack a few things." I watched him go up the stairs. His shoulders were slumped. He looked defeated. And while part of me felt compassion, the other part, the hurt and betrayed part, just felt relief that he would soon be gone. Ernest put his hand on mine. "You did the right thing." I nodded, though I wasn't sure of anything. Nothing felt right at this moment. Half an hour later, Mark came down with 2 suitcases. He stopped at the entrance to the living room, where I was still sitting. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days, until I find an apartment." He paused. "Mom, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I was a coward, a bad son. And I'm going to have to live with that for the rest of my life." His voice broke. "I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm so sorry I failed you." I stood up. I walked towards him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I hugged him. It was a brief, tense hug full of pain, but it was the only thing I could offer him right now. "I love you too," I whispered. "That's why this hurts so much." We pulled apart. Mark picked up his bags and walked out the door. I heard his car start. I heard the sound fade down the street. And then silence filled the house. I sank onto the sofa. The tears I had been holding back finally came. I cried for my son, for the relationship we had lost, for the broken trust, for the pain of watching someone you love choose someone else over you again and again. Ernest sat beside me and held me as I cried. He didn't say anything. He was just there. Sometimes that's all you need. Someone to be present in your pain without trying to fix it. Have you ever had to put distance between yourself and someone you love to protect yourself? Have you felt that pain of choosing your well-being over a relationship that was destroying you? Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes loving someone means letting them go, even if it hurts, even if it feels like tearing out a piece of your own heart. The next few days passed in a strange haze. The house was quiet in a way I had never experienced before. It wasn't the peaceful silence of being alone. It was the heavy silence of absence, of things left unsaid, of broken relationships. I looked in the mirror every morning and saw the bruise changing color, from dark purple to a yellowish green. It was a constant reminder of everything that had happened. A map of pain painted on my face. Ernest stayed with me for that first week. He cooked when I had no energy. He answered the phone when I didn't want to talk to anyone. Several people called after the party, some with genuine concern, others with morbid curiosity disguised as caring. "Is it true what happened, Monica? Did your daughter-in-law really hit you? Did Mark really defend her?" Ernest dismissed them all with curt answers. "My sister needs privacy. Thanks for calling." And he would hang up without further explanation. Mark sent messages every day. At first they were long, full of apologies, full of explanations about how Caroline had manipulated him, about how he saw everything clearly now, about how he wanted to fix things. I read them, but I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. The words felt empty. The apologies came too late. The damage was already done. As the days went by, the messages became shorter, more desperate. "Mom, please talk to me. I just want to know you're okay. I miss you." But I still didn't answer. I needed silence. I needed space to process everything I had been through. One afternoon, David the lawyer came to visit. He had news. "Caroline has hired a lawyer," he said as we had tea in the living room. "She's starting the divorce proceedings." I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because it meant she would be out of our lives. Sadness because it meant Mark's marriage had ended in disaster. "What is she asking for?" I asked. David grimaced. "She's asking for compensation for the 2 years of marriage. She claims she left her job to support Mark, that she deserves a share of the marital assets." "But Mark has no assets," I said, confused. "Everything he has is in my name, the house, the investments, everything." David nodded. "Exactly. That's why her lawyer is trying to argue that Mark has a right to an advance on his inheritance, that you should give him a portion of your estate so he can meet his divorce obligations." I was speechless. Even now, even after everything, Caroline was still trying to get to my money. But now she was using Mark as a legal intermediary. "That's not going to work, is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. David shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. There's no such thing as a mandatory advance on inheritance. You decide what to do with your assets and when. No one can force you to give anything, especially not under these circumstances." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Does Mark know what she's doing?" David shrugged. "I'm not sure, but he should. It's his divorce after all." That night I sent a message to Mark, the first in a week. "Do you know Caroline is asking for me to give you money to pay her?" The reply came almost immediately. "What, no? I didn't know anything about that." Then another message. "Mom, I swear I didn't ask her for anything. I don't want your money. I just want to fix things between us." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think Mark wasn't part of this scheme, but my trust was so damaged that I didn't know what to believe anymore. 2 more weeks passed. The bruise finally faded from my face, but the wound in my heart was still bleeding. Ernest had to go back to his job, to his life. He hugged me before he left. "You're going to be okay," he said. "You're stronger than you think." I nodded, even though I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. I felt old. I felt alone. The house felt even emptier after he left. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman I didn't recognize. I opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Monica?" she asked with a kind smile. I nodded. "I'm a private investigator. I was hired by your son's lawyer." My heart raced. Mark had hired an investigator. "What for?" "I've been looking into Caroline Mendez's financial past," the woman continued, "and I found some information I think you should know." I invited her in. We sat in the living room. She opened a folder full of documents. "Caroline has a history of relationships with older or widowed men with property. Her previous marriage ended when the husband's family discovered she was forging documents to transfer properties into her name." A chill ran down my spine. "Does Mark know this?" The investigator nodded. "He's the one who hired me. When he started to have suspicions, he wanted to know the truth. And the truth is, Caroline is a professional con artist. She has over $80,000 in gambling debts. Loan sharks are looking for her. That's why she needed this house so desperately." It all started to make sense. The rush to get married, the insistence on moving into the house, the constant comments about the property's value. The research into having me declared incompetent. It wasn't just ambition, it was desperation. She was running from her debts and saw an escape in Mark in me in our house. "There's more," the investigator said. "She was in contact with real estate agents 3 months before your birthday incident. She asked them how long it took to sell a property after the owner was declared unfit to make decisions. She had a detailed plan." I covered my mouth with my hand. The horror of what could have happened hit me like a wave. If I had been weaker, if I hadn't had Ernest, if David hadn't shown up that night with the documents, Caroline could have succeeded. She could have taken everything from me, my house, my dignity, my freedom. "Mark saw all of this?" I asked. The investigator nodded. "Yes, and he was devastated. That's why he's proceeding with the divorce without any resistance. He wants her out of his life as quickly as possible." After the investigator left, I sat in silence for a long time, processing everything I had heard. Caroline was worse than I had imagined. She wasn't just an ambitious or manipulative woman. She was a criminal, a predator who sought out vulnerable victims. And she almost succeeded. She almost destroyed my life. She almost destroyed my son. The phone rang. It was Mark. I hesitated before answering. Finally, I did. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded tired. "The investigator came to see you." "Yes," I confirmed. There was a long silence. "Now you understand why I feel so stupid, so used. I married a con artist and didn't see the signs." "She was good at what she did," I said softly. "She fooled us both." Mark sighed. "But you saw it before I did. You tried to warn me and I didn't listen. I treated you horribly to defend her. And now I have to live with that." His voice broke. "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" The question hung between us. I closed my eyes. I thought about all the pain, the humiliation, the betrayal. But I also thought about the good years, about the boy I had raised, about the man he could become again if he learned from this. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," I said honestly, "but I want to try. With time, with space, with therapy maybe." I heard Mark exhale as if he had been holding his breath. "I want to try too, Mom. I want to get our relationship back. I want to be the son you deserve, the son Dad would have wanted me to be." Tears started to roll down my cheeks. "Your father would be disappointed by what happened," I said. "But he would also believe in second chances. He always believed in them." We talked a little more, cautiously, carefully, like two people who knew each other a long time ago and are trying to recognize each other again. When we hung up, I felt strangely light. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It wasn't total reconciliation. But it was a start. A small crack in the wall that had been built between us. And for now, That was enough. The following months were about slow healing, like when you break a bone and have to wait patiently for it to mend, knowing it might never be exactly the same as before. Mark and I saw each other once a week, always in public places, a coffee shop, a park, places where we both felt safe. The first meetings were awkward, long pauses between words, glances that didn't hold. But slowly, very slowly, we started to find something like what we had lost. Mark started therapy. He told me one afternoon over coffee. "The therapist says I was a victim of psychological abuse," he said, looking at his cup. "That Caroline used classic manipulation techniques, isolation, gaslighting, gradual control." He paused. "But that doesn't excuse me, Mom. I made choices too. I chose to believe her over you. I chose to ignore the signs, and that's something I have to carry." I nodded. He was right. Being a victim didn't erase the consequences of his actions. The divorce process was long and ugly. Caroline fought every point. She asked for compensation for time invested. She asked for emotional damages. She even asked for the clothes Mark had given her. Her lawyer sent letter after letter, threat after threat. But David was relentless. He presented all the investigators' evidence, the documents about her debts, the records of her searches on how to declare people incompetent, her previous marriages, and the patterns of fraud. Eventually, Caroline's lawyer advised her to accept a quick, clean settlement or face criminal charges. One afternoon, David called me with news. Caroline signed. The divorce is final. She gets nothing but her personal belongings. And there's a permanent restraining order. She can't come within 200 yards of you or Mark. I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. She was gone. She was really gone. "Where is she now?" I asked. David hesitated. "From what I understand, she left the state, probably running from her creditors. But that's not our problem anymore." Mark moved into a small apartment. He invited me to see it one Saturday. It was modest, a single bedroom, basic furniture, nothing fancy, but it looked clean, tidy. There were family photos on the walls, pictures of him as a child, pictures with Frank, pictures with me before everything fell apart. "I'm starting over," he told me as he made tea. "No pretenses, no living beyond my means, just me working healing." He showed me his space with a certain shy pride. He was a different man from the one who had defended Caroline that horrible night. But the real test came months later. It was a quiet Sunday. Mark came to visit me at the house for the first time since he had left. He walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, looking at the photos, remembering. When we got to the kitchen, he stopped. "This is where it all exploded," he said softly. "This is where Uncle Ernest told me Dad would be ashamed of me." His eyes filled with tears. And he was right. Dad would be ashamed. I'm ashamed. We sat at the table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Mark began. "And I need you to listen until the end." I nodded. He took a deep breath. "I've been working with my therapist on accountability, on not hiding behind excuses, and I realized something." He paused. "Caroline manipulated me, yes, but I let her do it because deep down, a part of me wanted this house. I wanted what Dad built, and that made it easier for her to manipulate me." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "When she suggested things about you being difficult or old-fashioned, I didn't stop her because a small, selfish part of me thought that if you left the house would be mine. Not consciously, not actively. But the seed was there. Tears were streaming down his cheeks now. And that's why I'm just as guilty as she is. Because my ambition, my greed, allowed all of this to happen. It was painful to hear, but it was also necessary. It was the raw truth we had been avoiding. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally. "And you're right. Caroline couldn't have manipulated you if she hadn't found something in you to latch onto." Mark nodded miserably. "I know, and that's why I don't expect you to forgive me completely. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just hope I can show you over time that I'm better than my worst decisions. I extended my hand across the table. He took it. "Mark, your father and I raised you to be a good man. And good men make mistakes. Big mistakes sometimes. But they also learn. They also grow. They also redeem themselves." I squeezed his hand. "I'm not going to lie and say everything is okay, because it's not. But I'm willing to walk with you while you work on being better. That's all I can offer you right now." Mark sobbed. He got up and hugged me, a long hug, a hug that asked for forgiveness without words. I hugged him back. My boy, my broken son trying to put himself back together. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything." I cried with him. For everything we had lost. For everything we could still regain. For the long road still ahead of us. After that day, something changed between us. It was as if we had finally cleaned the wound. It hurt. It burned. But now it could start to truly heal. Mark started coming over more often, not too much. He didn't try to force things, but every week, every month, we rebuilt a little more of the bridge between us. We had dinner together occasionally. He fixed things that broke around the house. I cooked his favorite dishes like before. One day he told me he had met someone, a woman from his work. "She's different from Caroline in every way," he told me with a shy smile. "She's honest, transparent. She has her own apartment, her own car, her own life. She doesn't need anything from me except companionship." He paused. "And this time I'm going slow. This time I'm paying attention to the signs. This time I'll listen to you if you see something I don't." And I smiled. "I'd like to meet her. When you're ready. No pressure." The months turned into a year, then 2. The anniversary of that horrible birthday party came and went. This time we celebrated with just Mark, Ernest, and me. Something small, intimate, quiet. I blew out the candles on my cake, and Mark hugged me. "Happy birthday, Mom. I love you." And this time, when he said those words, I felt they were true. I felt they were real. I felt they were earned. Have you had to rebuild a relationship after a deep betrayal? Have you learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to move forward despite the pain? Sometimes healing isn't fast. It isn't easy. It doesn't erase the scars. But it is possible, with time, with honesty, with hard work from both sides. And sometimes, just sometimes, what was broken can be put back together in a different but equally valuable way. The house was still mine, my sanctuary, my fortress. But it no longer felt like a prison of painful memories. It felt like a home again, a place where I had survived the storm, a place where I had found my strength when I thought I had none left. The old curtains that Frank had chosen were hanging in the windows again. The furniture Caroline had moved was back in its original place. Every corner was mine again. And although the pain of what had happened never completely disappeared, I learned something important. I learned that protecting myself didn't make me selfish. I learned that setting boundaries didn't make me cruel. I learned that sometimes the greatest love you can give is to refuse to be destroyed, even if it means temporarily letting go of the one you love, because only by staying whole can you be there when they are finally ready to rebuild. 2 years after that horrible night, I was in my garden pruning the roses Frank had planted decades ago. The morning sun was warm on my back. The flowers had bloomed spectacularly this season, red, yellow, peach, each one more beautiful than the last. There was something therapeutic about caring for these plants, in seeing how something that looked dead in winter could be reborn with such strength in the spring. I heard a car pull up in front of the house. It was Mark, but he wasn't alone. A woman got out of the passenger side. Beatrice. I had met her 6 months earlier at a casual dinner. She was an elementary school teacher. She had a genuine smile and kind eyes, and most importantly, she treated Mark as an equal. She didn't flatter him. She didn't manipulate him. She simply accompanied him in his life in a healthy, balanced way. "Hi, Mom." Mark greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. Beatrice hugged me warmly. "Monica, the roses look beautiful." I smiled at her. "Thank you, dear. Your help last month made all the difference." We went inside. I had prepared lunch, chicken stew with rice and a fresh salad. We sat at the table, the same table where so much had happened. but now the bad memories were being replaced by new ones, better ones. We ate chatting about trivial things, Mark's work, Beatrice's students, the flowers in the garden. It was normal. It was peaceful. It was what it should have always been. After lunch, Mark and I went out to the porch. We sat in the rocking chairs Frank had built. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Mark said finally. My heart skipped a beat for an instant. Mark must have noticed because he quickly added, "It's a good thing, I promise." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Okay, tell me." Mark turned to look at me. "I asked Beatrice to marry me, and she said yes." My first instinct was joy, but then fear immediately followed, the memories of Caroline. Mark read my expression. "I know what you're thinking, and I get it. After Caroline, I was scared too, but Mom Beatrice is different, completely different." He continued. "She knows everything that happened. I told her about Caroline, about how I treated you, about the divorce, everything, and she didn't run away. And there's something else. She insisted we sign a prenuptial agreement. She doesn't want any of my future assets if things don't work out." That surprised me, and it gave me hope. "When's the wedding?" I asked. Mark smiled. "We haven't set a date yet, but before we planned anything, I needed your blessing. Beatrice said she wouldn't marry me if you weren't comfortable, that your opinion is important, that family is built on mutual respect." I felt tears sting my eyes. "You have my blessing," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Beatrice is a good woman. I can see that." Mark hugged me. "Thanks, Mom. That means everything to me." Then he added something else. "Mom, about this house. I want you to know that I will never, ever ask you to leave it. This is your house, your home, and it will be until the day you decide otherwise. Beatrice and I are going to build our own life, in our own space. We don't need or want this house." Those words released something in me that I didn't even know I was holding on to. Beatrice came out onto the porch. "Did you tell her?" she asked with a smile. Mark nodded. She came over and sat on the floor in front of my rocking chair. "Monica, I know I have big shoes to fill. I want you to know that I deeply respect everything you've been through. And if you ever feel like I'm crossing a line, I hope you'll tell me, directly, without fear." I looked into her eyes. They were sincere, clear. "Thank you for saying that, Beatrice, and please call me Monica." She smiled widely. "Only if you'll call me daughter when you feel ready." My heart clenched. Daughter. I'd had a daughter-in-law who used that title as a weapon. Could I open myself up to another? "I'd like that," I said finally. "I'd like that very much. Daughter." Beatrice stood up and hugged me. A genuine hug. No calculations behind it. Mark watched us with tears in his eyes. His family, fragmented and broken, was finding a way to heal. The following months were filled with wedding preparations. This time I was involved. Beatrice consulted me on every decision, not because she needed my approval, but because she genuinely valued my opinion. The wedding was held in a beautiful garden, small, intimate, just close family and true friends. When Mark and Beatrice exchanged vows, I cried. But these were different tears from the ones I had shed 2 years ago. At the reception, Ernest sat next to me. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I thought about his question. "At peace," I finally replied. "For the first time in a long time, I feel at peace." Ernest smiled and raised his glass. "To peace, to healing, to endings that are really new beginnings." We toasted. Around us, people were laughing, dancing, celebrating. And I was there, part of it. No longer invisible, no longer displaced. That night back at my house, I sat in the living room. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of good memories and bad, full of lessons learned, full of second chances. I looked at Frank's picture on the mantel. "We did it," I said out loud. "I protected what we built. I protected our son, even when it meant letting him go. And now I think we're going to be okay." I stood up and walked through the house. Every room had a story. The kitchen where Caroline and I had our final confrontation, the living room where I had been humiliated in front of everyone. but also the table where Mark and I had begun to rebuild our relationship, the porch where I had given him my blessing, the garden where Frank's roses bloomed every year without fail. This house had witnessed my lowest moment, but also my greatest strength. Here I had learned that protecting myself wasn't selfishness, that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, that sometimes the greatest love you can give is to refuse to be destroyed, because only by staying whole can you be there when the people you love finally wake up, when they finally choose to be better. I went up to my room. I looked in the mirror. 72 years old, lines on my face that told stories, eyes that had seen pain but also redemption. You survived, I told myself. More than that, you won. Not with revenge, not with hatred, but by staying true to who you are. I lay down in my bed, in my house, in my sanctuary that no one could take from me. Sometimes protecting the past is saving the future. Frank knew that when he wrote that clause in his will. He knew I would need protection. And he gave me the tools to defend myself even after his death. Thanks to that, I was able to stand firm. I was able to say no. I was able to demand respect in my own house. And eventually that firmness saved not only my home but also my son. I closed my eyes feeling grateful. Grateful for having survived, for having healed, for having a second chance with my son, for meeting Beatrice, for having Ernest's unconditional support. Life had hit me hard. It had shown me the dark side of the people I loved, but it had also shown me my own strength, a strength I didn't know I had until I desperately needed it. Have you had to let go of someone you love to save yourself? Have you discovered a strength inside you that you didn't know existed? Tell me your story in the comments. Because we all have battles, we all have scars, but we also all have the capacity to heal, to rebuild, to choose peace over resentment. This house is still mine. These keys that Carolyn coveted so much are still in my possession, not because they represent money or status, but because they represent something much more valuable: my autonomy, my right to exist in my own space without asking permission, my freedom to live without fear, and that no one can ever take from me. So if you are going through something similar, if someone is trying to take what is yours, if you feel invisible in your own life, listen to me, resist, stand firm, seek help, trust your instincts, and above all, remember that protecting yourself is never selfishness. It's survival, it's self-love, it's justice. The truth always comes to light. And those who stay true to themselves, those who refuse to be destroyed, those are the ones who finally find peace.